rubbing one's knuckles on a person's head so as to produce a mildly painful sensation.
Very appropriate.
It's an idiom. It's like tough beans is another way to say it.
Yes.
It just means too bad.
Yes. Okay. Agari Prabhu, is this, I hear a little bit of delay sometimes when Maharaj speaks and cuts off. Do you have a plan B if our internet, our futuristic space age internet doesn't work well?
My side
yes, is some connected to the secondary line, so I'll continue.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Jai. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, Maharaj.
Where are you parked?
Maharaj?
Where are you parked?
No, I am parked. I think it's called Cedarwood. It was the first Brahmachari ashram building on Gita Nagari. So it's been converted to office space now.
Wow, how nice.
Yeah.
You don't know.
Hare Krishna.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay. So you may see some familiar faces eventually. So let me introduce the featured special stellar illustrious speaker of the day. His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami. Jayadvaita Swami is an editor for Prabhupada in 1968 at the age of 18. Practically, the first task assigned to him was to staple booklets. He later on went on to typing manuscripts, transcribing Srila Prabhupada's dictation for books, and then typesetting, proofreading, managing book production, editing, and taking part in it. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Agari Prabhu.
Adibo.
Yes, can you tell me what was that? Agari Prabhu? We got cut off completely, had to reconnect.
Yeah, it's the internet.
Okay, well, Maharaj, perhaps you can just visualize that you're in India right now, where the things are common.
I don't have to.
So can you all?
I don't have to visualize that. I can just imagine I'm in Gita Nagari.
Yes, that will be very, very appropriate. Okay, well, we'll continue with your abbreviated bio. He has lectured extensively at colleges and universities, especially in the United States. In 1978, he accepted the Order of Renounced Life, Sannyas. In 1985 and 86, he spent a year and a half traveling with a party of pilgrims on Padayatra, a journey on foot through various states of India, stopping in a different town or village every night. In 1987, along with Dhanurdhara Swami and Burijan Das, he co-founded the Vrindavan Institute for Higher Education. From 1988 until 2017, he served as the director of Srila Prabhupada's publishing house, the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. From 1991 through most of 1998, he served as editor-in-chief of Back to Godhead magazine, for which he had been an assistant editor for several years. From 2008 till 2018, he served as a director of the Bhaktivedanta Archives, the official repository for historical records from Srila Prabhupada's life and work. He served as a senior editor of a 3-volume translation and commentary, a publication completed in 2005, for the Sri Brihad Bhagavatamrita, a 16th century Sanskrit philosophical and devotional work by Srila Sanatana Goswami and by the same author, Sri Krishna Lila Stava, published in 2008. He also served as a senior editor for Srila Jiva Goswami's Tattva Sandarbha, published in 2013. He's the author of Vanity Karma, Ecclesiastes, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Meaning of Life, Bhaktivedanta Book Trust 2015, winner of a Benjamin Franklin Gold Award from the Independent Book Publishers Association. He does not initiate disciples. Apart from his services in publishing, he travels widely teaching about the philosophy and culture of Krishna consciousness. You do not initiate disciples, yet you do have disciples, correct? A handful.
Yeah, handful.
Okay. I did read, probably it may have been the Bhakti Ratnakar, that a guru shouldn't have more than 5 disciples. So I think you're doing okay in that regard.
I shouldn't even have 5, but what can be done?
Maybe you can convince them. Okay, well, since this is a bit of a ipso facto, spontaneous talk, because I announced that was going to be the appearance of Ramanujacharya, which is correct. Today's the appearance of Ramanujacharya. But I would like to first hear from you about some of the early days. How did you come to Krishna consciousness? What was happening? What kind of milieu did you grow up in, and how did you meet the devotees? Let's start with that.
Well, I lived in New York City for some time, like a year or something like that. And while there, I met the devotees. Well, I came to the temple, really, and I joined right away. Someone told me, Kanchan Bala, my god sister, older god sister, told me that when I came, Brahmananda said after, like, I came once or twice, he said, he's in. And I was. So, and then Prabhupada came 2 months later, and that's how I met Srila Prabhupada. And I've laid out the story at greater length in my book. And but that's the short version. And
tell us what was the clinch for you? What was the clincher there? Prabhupada, because you joined before meeting Prabhupada.
I was already clinched before Prabhupada came. Before I met Prabhupada, I'd already committed myself, basically.
You want the whole thing?
Maharaj, sorry to interrupt you, but Ken, you're not unmuted. You're not muted. And Jagannath Pandit Prabhu, you're not muted. Now you're muted. So there is no echo and conversation. Sorry, please continue.
Okay. Yeah, I already joined seriously before meeting Srila Prabhupada by the influence of the devotees, the kirtan especially, and kirtan, prasadam, and philosophy. Those are the 3 things, and they each have power, and they all influenced me.
And what was your how was your first meeting with Prabhupada?
I was in a big crowd of devotees. But Prabhupada came from the airport, and so many devotees were there. It wasn't like the classical. I met Prabhupada on the street, or this or that. I joined ISKCON, and Prabhupada came. And then after the day after I was initiated, actually, Srila Prabhupada went to Boston, and I went there to assist Govinda Dasi and Gursundar in serving him. So that way I got 2 weeks of personal association, which was wonderful, of course.
How did you get into, were you a big reader? Did you used to write? How did you get into
No, I used to read.
Letters?
I used to read. I didn't write. I was never much of a writer. I used to read a lot. And so when I came to, I sort of zoomed in on things that had to do with the books. I was a good typist, so I wound up working in the BTG and BTG office, typing manuscripts, retyping the whole Bhagavad Gita as it is, and that sort of thing.
And you said your first service was stapling booklets. That was a mimeograph back to Godhead? What were you stapling?
Who's Crazy, Introduction to Gita Upanishad, and on chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. These were all short little booklets that were published. I don't even know how they were printed, but they were there. And I know how they were printed. We had an arrangement with a local printer. We would stuff envelopes for him and he would print stuff for us. I think that's how it happened.
Did you have anything to do with any of those booklets?
No, other than stapling them. They were all done before I came.
Let's get to the present. What issues within the movement concern you? That I guess when you give lectures, what do you talk about? If you don't have to talk about a particular verse, what do you choose to
I try to talk about the particular verse, but the things that I'm working on when I'm not giving class, I have 3 books sort of in process. One is, they're all from seminars I've done. The first one is a book about kirtan standards, which Tarak Prabhu asked me to turn into a book. And I have a draft of that, which I'm gradually publishing in installments on my website, jswami.info. The first few installments, short installments, are online, and I'll gradually put more up there. And I'm looking for feedback, people who'd like to say too much of this, not enough of that. Feedback is welcome. So that's the first thing I'm working on, because I've seen that kirtan has grown farther and farther away from what Srila Prabhupada gave us, or the standards Srila Prabhupada gave us. A lot of things have been introduced that he didn't ask us to introduce, and some things that certainly shouldn't be introduced. There are things he told us not to do that we do. There are things that he told us to do that we don't do. There's things that we have to, and so on. And a lot of it's become quite a mess. So, so the book is mostly evidence-based. It's what Prabhupada said in various letters or on various occasions, or in books, with some references from previous acharyas. So that's the first thing. Kirtan standards. Second one that I'm working on is called the Vanaprastha Adventure. Srila Prabhupada wrote that the young boys and girls in the Krishna consciousness movement will are later expected to adopt the Vanaprastha ashram. Our demographics are such that we have many eligible candidates. When I joined, there were essentially none, but now there are many. And many just don't have, there's not like a clear picture for most devotees. What is the Vanaprastha ashram? What does it have to do with me? Is it necessary or not necessary, or advantageous or not advantageous? And if I want to adopt the Vanaprastha ashram, what do I do? What does it look like? What's the path? And there hasn't been a lot of clarity about that as far as I've seen. And so I'm trying to, again, gather statements from Srila Prabhupada that have authority on the topic, and also address a lot of practical concerns that devotees have, and suggest things that devotees could do who are interested or interested in or serious about going in that direction. So that's the second book. The third book is, which I haven't started yet, I'm working on the Vanaprastha book. The third book is called What Are the Four Rules? The basic premise being that people don't know.
Uh-huh. Well, I think we found, at least I did, found the topic for tonight. I would like to concentrate on your Vanaprastha book, or the ideas behind it, since as perhaps I have my own vested interest on that being of age to qualify, if I may, for the ashram. So tell us, what is that we hardly anybody knows about Vanaprastha ashram?
Yeah, the great unknown territory. We know, first of all, that Srila Prabhupada said that he wanted to establish Varnashram. There's been a lot of emphasis on Varna, especially in places like Gitanagari, commendably. But there hasn't been all that much about ashram. Some years ago, I think we're going back well more than a decade, there was a lot of sort of emphatic call for Varnashram. The context was that most of the devotees, or that the emphasis in ISKCON had been on brahmachari life, and with some sannyasis. And so the voice for Varnashram was coming from the householders, really, and Varnashram was, in that context, sort of a code for householder life. What about householder life? That's great that we have all these brahmacharis, but what are grihastas supposed to do? So we have to have a proper social place for the grihasta ashram. So that's what was really meant, as far as I could see, by Varnashram. Those voices are no longer heard because, well, not because, but they're no longer heard. But if they were heard, what we'd be talking about is the next ashram, because those devotees are no longer 30 or 35, they're 60 and so on. So first of all, we take it that Varnashram is important, and within Varnashram, the ashrams are important, and specifically Vanaprastha ashram is important. In any culture worth its name, there's some expectations about what we do at different times in our life. The children go to school or work on the farm. The young people get married or don't, but usually do. And the older people at some point retire or take on roles of elders and so on. So, and then there are different kinds of arrangements around that, or expectations around that. So the Vedic process, as we know, brings us through 4 ashrams. The brahmachari ashram, which has, I suppose, undergone considerable de-emphasis over the last couple of decades. Certainly Gurukula has become, has dropped out of sight for the most part and been replaced by schools, whether devotee schools or non-devotee schools, and whether government syllabus or something else. And in various ways, the Brahmacharya ashram has become less important. And I haven't seen that there's a lot of devotee parents eager to send their, or eager to train their young, their sons as brahmacharis, which is unfortunate because without that training, they become less qualified to become grihastas, should they want to do so. That's the Brahmacharya ashram. We know what it is. We have sort of a clear picture of it. We saw it in action in Srila Prabhupada's time. So that's the first ashram. Second ashram, householder life, also very much in evidence in Srila Prabhupada's time. And we have a fairly clear idea, let's call it fairly clear idea of what grihastas are supposed to do. We may do it well, we may do it not as well, but grihastas are now the largest component, socially speaking, of the Hare Krishna movement. And we have a fairly clear picture of what a grihasta's duties are supposed to be, what a grihasta is supposed to do. Then comes the Vanaprastha ashram and sannyas. Sannyas, we also have a clear picture. Again, the execution may sometimes be excellent and sometimes not so great, but sannyasis were there in Prabhupada's time, and we do have a picture. The Vanaprastha ashram, again, is largely unknown. There wasn't much talk about Vanaprastha life in Prabhupada's time. Most of the devotees were not yet of Vanaprastha age, hardly anywhere. And we just haven't seen too much of it. But of course, we read about it in Srimad Bhagavatam. In many places, we read about the Maharaj Prithu, we read about Maharaj Anga, we read about many devotees who've gone to the forest, literally, with or without their wives. But again, that doesn't translate so immediately into our lives. We're not likely to head off to the forest, husband and wife, to live on roots and berries and all of that. So what exactly do we do? The first thing is that we do something. We don't remain in householder life till the end. Someplace in Srimad Bhagavatam, and I'm not speaking from my notes, but Srila Prabhupada said that to stay in householder life to the very end is a degradation. We're not meant to be attached until the very end to family life. The Manu says that when Prabhupada many times quotes, Panchashordham Vanam Vraje. By the age of 50, one must go, Vrajate is imperative, to the forest. Or, again, taking that contextually, we should adopt the Vanaprastha ashram. The Manu says, when you see your hair turning gray, when you see your skin wrinkling, when you see the children of your children, it's time. Time to time to go to the forest. I'm not quite sure whether those three are supposed to be separate, or whether they're supposed to be cumulative, whether you have to have all three of those. I tend toward thinking that all of them are indications that now the time has come. And Prabhupada speaks that way, that nature gives us clear indications that now old age is moving in on us. And these are signals, to move on. These are signals to move on. So now what are we doing that we're moving on? Overall, let's say that the theme of Vanaprastha life is detachment. In Grihastha life, the theme is attachment. Not that we're supposed to be insanely attached, but we, husband and wife, come together, and the man gets started on his career. They live together. They get a house, children, education, vehicles, various kinds of obligations and stuff. So the physical side of life increases. The man works his way up and earns more, and the grihasthas, no. The material sphere expands. It's no longer just hot milk and Krishna book and then lay down in your sleeping bag with the other brahmacharis. There's quite a different picture now. So in summary, we could say that we're building up. A young grihastha couple builds up their family life. That's appropriate. But now, after, say, 25 years of family life, it's time to wind down. It's time to wind down. The children are presumably grown, they're older, ideally they have their own lives, and our responsibilities are now not the same. We're not expected to, be engaged in money making and supporting family necessities until we reach the funeral pyre. We're expected to, before that time comes, well before that time comes, wind things down. What is that winding things down? Well, a headline, first of all, is that in the Vanaprastha ashram, there's no sex. In brahmachari life, there's no sex. In sannyas, there's no sex. And in the Vanaprastha ashram, there's no sex. We hear that sex is the greatest, is the anchor of material attachment. It's the greatest attachment in the material world, the attachment between man and woman. Pumsa striya maitini, what is that? Striya maitini ekam? My goodness. Maitini pavame. Maitini pavamekam. Mito tayor mito hridaya grantamahu. When husband and wife unite in sex, the hard knot of material attachment becomes very strong. So, of course, in grihastha life, there's not supposed to be unrestricted sex, but certainly in the Vanaprastha life, there's no sexual intercourse at all. That's the rule for the Vanaprastha ashram. So that's a headline item. And that's a strong now sign or step in detachment. No sex. As the brahmacharis and the sannyasis have no sex, the vanaprasthas have no sex. Either they were having no sex to begin with, not to begin with, but for quite some time, or if they were still having sex, now it's time to give it up. So that's, as I said, the headline item. Then there are many other things that we can detach ourselves from. There's stuff for example. Speaking on the Vanaprastha ashram, Pancharatna Prabhu and the Tita Gunadasi told in Mayapur about how they just got rid of so much stuff. They made it a project, looked at it and said, we have all this stuff that we're not going to need. We have no use for it in the grave and we don't need it now. And so they gave away for so much stuff. How much do we accumulate in householder life? What knickknacks and mementos and stuff that our children, after we die, will say, well, look at all this stuff that mom accumulated. What are we going to do with it? Chuck it. Stuff that has that we don't need. They're related to our bodily identity. They're related to Kriya Kshetra Sutta Apta. Now it's time to get rid of so many things, from useless trinkets to unnecessary books to unnecessary anything. Look at it and say, do I need it? Yes, no. Not exactly as to the point, but when my mother moved at the age of 97 from Florida to New Jersey, she just got rid of so much stuff because she said, what am I going to do with it? And we went through her stuff and, no, don't need it. No. Cutting down. So the Vanaprasthas are meant just not to have unnecessary stuff. We may not go to the forest, but at least we can get rid of unnecessary necessities. Among other unnecessary necessities, there may be just useless material things. Do I need a Netflix subscription? Do I need a television? What am I doing with the television? Is it making me more Krishna conscious or less Krishna conscious? If less, let's ditch it. So whether it was, however, for whatever reason, we accumulated so many things that don't contribute to Krishna consciousness, now we can start shedding these burdens, these obstructions to spiritual advancement, because our goal is to go back to Godhead and not be weighted down by needless attachments. Another point, and this is in Bhagavatam, is that the Vanaprasthas should not be busy in social affairs. I see many older people older devotees, not just older people, but older devotees, and their life is, punctuated by weddings and graduations and betrothals and all sorts of social functions, birthdays relating to the family. And I'm not this body. And this family is not ultimately my family. So these things may be appropriate in family life, but now, what does it have to do with me? What does it have to do with me? Why should I be spending my time in these social obligations or joyous social occasions? Really, it has nothing to do with my eternal identity. And therefore, it's explicitly mentioned in Bhagavatam that the Vanaprastha should not be engaged in ordinary social affairs of this nature. And once we start turning down invitations, people get to know, well, this person's become a Vanaprastha, so they don't go to these things anymore. Okay, we get it. That's another point. And again, in the Bhagavatam, it's said that it's a kind of a fall down for the Vanaprastha to be engaged in social, in gramya activities, village activities, social stuff. So that's another thing that, and this becomes like the focus of our life, bouncing our grandkids on our knees and so on. At least for the men, this is not what we're supposed to do. Let's see if there was one other thing in my mind about giving what we give up. If there is, we'll come to it later. So this is all within the category of winding down, the material side of our life. Some may do it more quickly, some may do it more slowly, according to one's strength, but one should make a firm decision. This is what I'm doing. One can change one's identity. I know some Vanaprasthas they drop the Das Adhikari and become Das Vanachari, or yes, or Das Gauravanachari. Either way, there are a couple of different wrinkles on it. But announcing to themselves and others that I'm not a grahastha anymore. I was for long enough, and now I'm moving on. One might change one's cloth, it's not required. Prabhupada wore white as a Vanaprastha. One might wear yellow. One doesn't wear saffron if the wife is still anywhere in the picture. But the idea is to firmly situate oneself in this way, that I'm moving on. I may not go to the forest because I'm not in Dwapara Yuga anymore, but I'm moving on. I've spoken about negative things we give up. There are three things that we would want to increase. And one is sadhu sangha, the association of advanced devotees. That's the reason why Vanaprasthas would go to holy places to associate with advanced devotees. And we can also seek out the association of devotees who are considered more advanced. Sadhu Sangha. And another item, sadhana. In family life, so often we hear, no time, I wish I had time, Maharaj, how can I find the time? No time, no time. Now there's time. This is the time to read Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada told one elderly devotee when who asked what his engagement should be, Prabhupada said, more japa. More japa, chant more on your beads, which he did. And to his wife, he said, be engaged in the deity worship, the worship of the deity, which she did. So sadhana, worshiping the deities, chanting Hare Krishna in kirtan or on beads, and studying with devotees. There are so many courses, there are so many opportunities for sadhana. Yes. If we're not rising earlier in the morning, if we've fallen out of that habit, we can revive it. If we're staying up late, we can start to take rest early. All of the things that are basic sadhana, as mentioned in the Nectar of Devotion. And a third thing, reading means to be absorbed in what we read. Chanting means to be absorbed in what we're chanting, or at least moving and aspiring to be absorbed in that way. And the third item is seva, to be engaged in Krishna's service, the service of the spiritual master, Gauranga Mahaprabhu, service of Krishna. And there's so many ways to do that. One might be engaged in preaching. One might be engaged in helping in the temple in some way. There's a Vanaprastha couple, many of you might know them, Vrindavan Chandra and his wife, Yashomati in Tuako. When their children grew up, they just moved into the temple some decades ago, and they've been serving the deities ever since. So increasing our service, whether by preaching, by serving the deity, by using whatever talents we've gained in the world to help in Krishna consciousness movement, counseling younger devotees. The Vanaprasthas are good candidates for guiding the grahastas. You know, what does a sannyasi know about family life? And sannyasis, some aspects of householder life shouldn't even be approached, but the Vanaprasthas can give wise counsel to the grahastas. And in so many ways, serving. There's we see even in the Christian world, the elderly ladies often volunteer for serving in a hospital, doing some charity work, and so on, not to waste their life, not to seek out another husband and another husband, pretend to be young, but to do some service. In the Christian context, that's usually seen as some kind of charitable or philanthropic work, or church seva. So we have our what we consider to be valuable engagements in Krishna consciousness, and the retired people can take that up. Maybe I'll just mention one more thing and then stop for comments or questions. Prabhupada in his books mentions several systems of householder life. The husband may leave home and wander to various places of pilgrimage, or the husband and wife may do that together, or the husband may go live in a holy place like Vrindavan, or husband and wife may do that together. And another system is that the wife stays at home with the children, and the husband comes and goes. He goes for some time, preaching or traveling, then he comes back, sees how things are going on, helps adjust things as needed, goes out, comes back, goes out, comes back. And Prabhupada said one day he just doesn't come back. The last thing is that Vanaprastha life means that it's a bridge between family life and sannyas, and it affords time for loosening that attachment, loosening that attachment, loosening that attachment. We don't need devotees to renounce on Tuesday and go back to their families on Friday. So the Vanaprastha ashram provides a pathway for gradual and increasing detachment from material entanglements and increasing attachment to Krishna, which is finally our purpose in life and the reason for which we came to the path of devotional service. All right, I'll stop there and see what kind of thoughts there might be.
I have a couple of thoughts, if you don't mind indulging me in this. Well, Prabhupada also called some of his disciples brahmachari. some brahmacharis, they're like sannyasis, and some grihasthas are like sannyasis. Why not vanaprasthas being like sannyasis, where there is no, perhaps the separation will be artificial at that point. I think sometimes the combination of husband and wife, if they are detached, if they are not practicing domestic life, including sex and trivial stuff and celebrations of the Gramya Kata order, they are preaching together. I even read in the Bhagavatam that there is no harm. Now, these are probably, I'm probably referring to exceptions, not the general rule. The general population will probably have to do a little more drastic adjustment in order to not agitate what was once their material refuge, like sex and relatives and all that stuff. So what's your opinion? Is this a blanket statement that you're making? Is that for everybody, or there are exceptions that they can continue the way they are? Like, for example, I'm thinking of Vaisheshika Prabhu.
I was just about to mention Vaisheshika Prabhu. Again, we're talking about the Vanaprastha ashram. This is not sannyas. In Vanaprastha ashram, husband and wife may serve together. And Vaisheshika Prabhu is an ideal example. He and his wife are serving together, but really with great detachment. With great detachment, it's just service. So that's ideal for the Vanaprastha ashram. The husband and wife may serve together, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's perfectly good. Then again, the Vanaprastha ashram can be, it's the third ashram out of 4, ideally. And in any case, we're going to leave the Vanaprastha ashram, either through sannyas or through death. So therefore, it's meant to be an ashram of increasing detachment. So what that increasing detachment might look like, that you have to decide. That you have to decide. But the idea is to be honest with ourselves, to be introspective, and to be moving forward. Because my goal is to become free from all encumbrances and entangled with the lotus feet of Krishna. So there's 25 years, ideally, in which to do that. And the theme is moving forward, moving forward, moving forward. And not just staying as we are. Of course, if we're already, highly detached and so on, but generally in family life, there's a healthy attachment between husband and wife and family members. But in the Vanaprastha life, that healthy attachment is meant to be loosened. And how we do that and what it looks like step by step may differ from person to person, from couple to couple, but that's the theme.
But would you recommend to Vaisheshika or Pancharatna or Virabaho Prabhu, you have to take sannyas at some point?
I know I don't have to recommend it to Vaisheshika Prabhu because it's already in his plan. He and his wife have they're into planning, They're such an organized couple. Both Vaisheshika Prabhu and his wife are highly organized people. And it's been on their, it's written into their plan since a long time ago. So I don't have to suggest it. It's already there. And now they're in, we've been in family life. Now we're going to be in Vanaprastha life. And eventually it's going to be sannyas. That's suitable for those who have the strength. If I don't have the strength to do it, then ideally I can try to develop that strength, or in any case, make progress to the greatest extent that I can. How's that? Let me just put it in, let me put it another way. We see a lot of plodding going on. People, we see our friends who are sort of stuck. They've got a service, they've got a family, they've got a routine, they've got their comforts, they've got their little attachments, and they have their little bit of preaching, they have their sadhana, and nothing wrong really with what they're doing, but it's very unexciting. They're holding on to a post perhaps that they should have given up 20 or 30 years ago, because if I weren't doing this, what would I do? Or because it helps, fit my, pull my finances together. And it should have been in the hands of someone, like 30 or 35 years ago, but they're still holding on. They're still, involved with the children and grandchildren and social affairs. They're chanting, they're doing, but these were people who perhaps in their brahmachari days were dynamic preachers. These are people who could make a substantial contribution to spreading Krishna consciousness. They could choose a city or a country and go there and make a difference. But no, we'll sit with our friends and family members in a big Krishna conscious community somewhere and live a nice life. Just sort of plodding, not really going forward, just doing, as you said, the same thing that they've done. And none of those things are sinful, but they could look at themselves and say, could I do more? Could I do more to serve my spiritual master? Could I do more to help the conditioned souls? And some of them, they're doing it. They're very, very active, and they're very, very engaged in preaching work and sadhana and so on. So it's not just because you live in a particular community or because you haven't taken sannyas yet that something is wrong. But it's time to look at ourselves and say, what am I doing? Could I do more? Am I still acting as a geriatric grihastha, or am I really on the road? Am I really in the ashram I should be in?
I find personally that although your general idea seems to resonate with me, I find that some couples that they are like, anyway, I can name a bunch of them. For example, Dana Kelly and Pritu Shrava, or people like that they're, I don't think they will.
I'm glad that you brought them up, because I was just in Mississippi, and the plan is not just to, settle quietly in Mississippi and have a nice, peaceful retirement. There's more in that picture. They are thinking, how am I going to move forward?
But I think the combination of them is very powerful. Like, for example, let's take
Devahuti and Kapil Dev. Now, that was a great Devahuti and Kardamuni, great combination. And what a son, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And yet, after he was born, as you know, Kardamuni said, okay, now it's forest time. Although his wife was so highly qualified and devoted, although his son was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, now it's my duty to move on. So we're not all Kardamuni, we're not all going to go to the forest, maybe none of us will go to the forest, but it illustrates the idea, first of all, that this attachment is so strong, and that the Vedic culture does give us a way to move forward and to free ourselves from gross and subtle attachments. There may be cases where it really doesn't make sense at all. You know, there may be individual circumstances where you look at it and say, you know, forget it. You people stay together and chant Hare Krishna and serve, and this is what you should do. And I could name examples where that's perfectly, this is what they should do for the rest of their life. But the norm is brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha, and ideally sannyas.
Okay, we do have a bunch of questions. The first one is on the chat. I'm going to read it to you, though you can see it yourself. Hare Krishna, dear Jayadvaita Swami Maharaj, I hope it is all right for a young man like me to ask a question about Vanaprastha ashram. I'm genuinely curious. What are the lifestyle exceptions to the required renunciation and austerity of Vanaprastha? If a couple is living in the temple or doing a lot of Sankirtan, does that absolve them of the obligation to be austere and renounced and detached from family? Although he said that you, more or less you answered the question already.
I think so. Prajalila has a question.
Yes. Go ahead, unmute yourself, please.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much. I so much always appreciate when you speak on this topic. I appreciate it because it brings up so much emotions. And it's always interesting to hear all the different, you know, to feel the emotions, just to feel those emotions. So thank you very much. My question, one is you were sharing about the devotees that may not be moving forward. That's the word you use, may not be moving forward. And I just wanted to share conversely, there are many devotees that we have such nice examples in our Krishna conscious movement. There are many beautiful examples that can show us, teach us how to be in the next phase, so to speak, or the next stage. So in terms of this point you made, Maharaj, and you made these 3 points, association of sadhu sangha, sadhana, and seva. I am just, it seems to me like that's something we're to do anyway, just as devotees, just as trying to be a devotee. We are supposed to be engaged in that way. And I know in my own case, I feel like I've been in the forest since I was 40 years old, 39 years old, whatever, you know, ever since I became a devotee, it's like being in the forest, to be honest with you. So how do we reconcile that these 3 ways to increase is what we're supposed to be doing as devotees anyway, whether we have the label of whichever ashram?
Well, it's increase. Prabhupada, excuse me a second, I have to answer the door. Yes. Just So, sorry, as Srila Prabhupada told that one devotee who happened to be in Fiji, more job. So that meant seriously upping, he went to, I think, 64 rounds a day, more job. So that's what Prabhupada gave him. And she became engaged, really fully engaged in the service of the deity. So we're already chanting Hare Krishna, we're already serving the deities, we're already reading, we're already doing all of these things. But now's the opportunity to do those things more, with greater concentration, to the exclusion of other things that, sort of drop other things and reapportion that time for these spiritual activities. Association, for example, sure, we associate with devotees, but there are opportunities to take serious association from advanced devotees, especially those who are already on the path of greater detachment. So it's not, in one sense, it's not something new. We're already chanting Hare Krishna. We're already doing all of these things. But now is our chance. Looking at it from another point of view, this is like a godsend that, or a second wind. Now in brahmachari life, I had freedom. I had all the time for all these spiritual activities. Then in family life, I had the kids and the job and the this and the that. Now I'm seeing freedom again. I don't have to work. I don't have to punch a clock or go around looking for customers. I don't have to be on the phone with, Bombay about code that's not working or whatever it is. Now my focus is on these spiritual activities. Now I can go and spend time in holy places. I can live in Vrindavan. I can spend serious time in these places where Prabhupada said Krishna automatically reveals. By travel, one becomes purified and develops greater detachment. All of these things, they make a difference. It's not just business as usual. Even if the business as usual is Krishna conscious business. We're looking for, how do I seriously up my game, as they say? How do I seriously move forward, given that time is running out? This gray hair, this wrinkling skin, these appearance of grandchildren or great-grandchildren, these are all signs. My time is running out. The hourglass doesn't have that much sand up in the top half anymore. So as that sand runs out, what am I going to do to be as Krishna conscious as I can in this human form of life before it's over? How Krishna conscious do I want to be? How fixed and determined and engaged do I want to be? And how much do I want to do for others before the game is over? What service do I want to do for my spiritual master before it's over? Are there, looking at another point, are there radical things that I could do? I'm just following, every day I have a regulated program, Krishna conscious. Is there something radical I could do that would make a huge difference? There may be. Maybe it's just adjustments that I make from day to day and from year to year. Maybe there's something where I say, hey, I could do something seriously different. Both possibilities are there.
Thank you, Maharaj. I
Bhakti.
see many devotees. I'm sorry about my Prabhu. I just finished this last point. Thank you. As I said, I always appreciate when you share in this theme. It seems to me, though, that some of what you share comes with age. Like as we age, it seems natural in some ways.
Absolutely. And I have a whole batch of stuff I write about that. By following Varnashram, we're basically doing what's natural for us to do in according with nature's clock. Otherwise, we're pretending. We're still wanting to be 30 or 40 when we're 60 or 70, and we're fighting against nature. Go with it. Nature's helping us. For a devotee, Srila B.R. Sridhar used to say that for a devotee, the whole environment is friendly. So the environment is helping us if we want to be helped. Thank you so much, Maji. Hare Krishna. There's Sahadev and Abraham.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah,
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Very nice class. Very nice conversation. I was wondering, can we apply this idea of detachment to the GBC and the sannyasis? Because my understanding of the books is that, what?
I certainly hope so. I cut you off, but continue. I just couldn't resist responding to your first sentence.
Yes, I was just wondering, is it natural for sannyasis to be in such managerial positions in the GBC as elders, in our movement, and having them take up so much of their time, detracting them from the real work of preaching, and not the real work, but preaching strongly. And
well, I don't want to pass judgment, and I appreciate my god brothers who've shouldered so much responsibility for Srila Prabhupada in the GBC and who continue to do so. That said, there's much to be said in favor of moving on. The world will go on without me as the GBC man for whatever the zone is, or for whatever the global input is that I offer. The world will go on, and that will be proven when I leave. So let it go on. If I may make a general observation, the GBC tends to be superannuated, or consist of superannuated individuals. It's an organization of mostly old men. And I think the GBC itself has recognized that it needs to fill its ranks with younger people. There may be people who are needlessly holding on and should move on. But again, I don't want to speak to, make blanket statements about what people should or shouldn't do, GBC members and so on. But I think that many of us would be very happy to see the example of older GBC men moving on and handing things over to younger men. Sri Ramraj has shown that example, and I think it's been very much appreciated. I heard that Govindamaraj just resigned, and I look forward to seeing others resign. BBT trustees, GBC men, BBT trustees, GBC men, temple presidents who really, their time has come, perhaps long ago. So, yeah, or whatever my service is. Prabhupada told me, he wrote to me, continue your prescribed duty and train others. So we should train others, and one way or another, hand things over. Alexander the Great was in control of most of the civilized world when he was in his early 30s. I think he died at the age of 35. And if someone's 40, we think, well, he's still a little young for the post. Get off it. It's time to move. And even, whether we're in some major post of responsibility or just in family life, this sets the example for the next generation that, son, this is where you're going to be going. You do this for a while, and then you give it up, because that's what I'm doing. And that's what generations before us have done. So it sets the example that, yes, I'm going to have to leave one way or another. Let me leave sooner rather than later. And the younger people will thank you for it. They want to take up responsibility. Youth has the energy to do it. And when you speak to the young people, they say, we don't want you to just disappear. We want you to guide us. That's ideal. You hand it over and you give guidance, you answer questions, you offer advice when advice is needed or wanted, and you step aside and watch somebody else do it, perhaps better than you, perhaps a different way than you would have done it, perhaps blowing it sometimes, but taking it on. Prabhupada did that. He didn't manage the entire Society for Krishna Consciousness. He gave it to 20-year-old men to manage, and he guided them and trained them.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you for the question. Good question.
So, Maharaj, the farm residents were disconnected. I'm situated in the location, but I'll share a response with Abe, who is one of the farm residents.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sahadev Prabhu, would you like to ask?
Hare Krishna, Maharaj, thank you so much for being here and blessing us with your wisdom. I am a Grihastha, so I have a question in Grihastha Ashram. You indicated, of course, that is what the scriptures say, that the people we have around us, we call our wives, children, they are all not real.
I think if you speak a little slower, it may help because the connection is not that good.
Okay. I was saying that you were indicating in your presentation, which of course is from the scriptures, that when people come together, man and woman come together, they marry, they have children, they become attached to the children, but obviously nature will separate them because in reality, they are not our children, they are not our wives, they are not our husbands. So we have to learn to disassociate ourselves before death comes in. Now, my question is, from my personal experience, looking at others also.
Looking
at others.
at others,
Other
yes.
people, yes. Is that when someone is not very advanced and a very selfless devotee of the Lord, whereby that person takes very good care of things that belong to the Lord. As ordinary devotees, as ordinary people, we tend to take care of things when we feel that it belongs to me. For example, I take very good care of my
I get that, but since we're, I think, over time, can you
summarize it? Okay. What I'm trying to say is there a way you can help us as struggling devotees, beginning devotees, how we can serve the Lord, understand that everything is temporary, yet we still have a duty to perform. So that we do not abandon what we're supposed to be doing, and at the same time, we do not become too attached to what we have.
Yeah, that's a good question. To go into it would, again, move me beyond the time because I have to move on also at the moment. Certainly in family life, someplace it's said in Bhagavatam that one should live as like a guest in one's own home. So we cultivate that sense of detachment by sadhana, by association, by devotional service, by preaching, by all these activities. They're meant to enable us to be ideal Krishna conscious grihasthas, engaged in family life, but with a spirit of devotional service infusing what we do. That's the picture of ideal grihastha life, that whatever we do is dedicated to Krishna. Manasa deha geha yoki chumor arpilutva pade nandakishore. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, my mind, my body, manasa deha, geha, my home, whatever I may have, I dedicate to you, Nandakishore. Then the next stage is that, I may take care of things, but now this is no longer for me to take care of. The wife is no longer, at that point may come, the wife is no longer for me to take care of. It's for her sons to take care of, or it's for others to take care of. It's not my job anymore to take care of this particular managerial responsibility. I may do it well, or I may do it badly, but I'm not going to do it forever. It's time for me to move on from that. So many things that may have been mine, I'm going to have to give up, and I should give up. I'll be happy to give up, although it may be hard, but I'll get greater happiness giving them up. So we welcome people into the Grahastha ashram, and then, but don't make it like the Chakravyuha. Abhimanyu knew how to get into the military formation, the Chakravyuha, but he didn't know how to get out. So the family life should not be the Chakravyuha. One should know how to leave also. And with that, maybe I should leave.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. On behalf of the residents here at Girinagri and the community members, we'd like to thank you for your very insightful discourse on renunciation and how to actually progress further towards entangling ourselves more with the lotus feet of Krishna. So on that note, if all the devotees can unmute themselves and kindly thank Maharaj for his wonderful knowledge and
Hare
association.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Hare
Krishna. Thank you very much.
Hare
Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, Bhumi Mataji. Nice to see you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please
Hare
accept our
Krishna.
humble obeisances. So
Hare
wonderful to see and
Oh,
hear
Hare
you
Krishna,
again.
Shravanjali. Hare Krishna. So
Hare
nice to see
Krishna.
you.
I'm sorry I'm not on screen. I'm not, but
Just the picture
we're-
is good. Thank you so much.
I'm so happy to see you. I hadn't seen you in a long time. So Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, thank you again, Maharaj. Thank you for coming. So good to see you.
Hey, hey Kabir. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Tarak Prabhu, Haribol.
Haribo, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Samavita Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai.
Hare
Hare Krishna.
Vrinda.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Hare Bol.